Hello everyone, in today's tutorial I want to show you how you can make this organic looking torus. It's actually quite a simple network. It's divided with 3 layers. So the first layers is the torus points, but I use the proximity to connect the points. And then the second layer is the floating points that you see. So it's actually just the points that I put on some post-processing. And then the third layer, as you can see, there's kind of tiny shadow. So I just use a grid, and then with that I use some shadows with the lights to complete the effect. So let's get started. Let's open up a new project file. Before we get started, I will provide this project file in my Patreon if you don't want to follow along. First thing we're gonna need is a point generator. We will change to Torus. We will use surface. The orientation would be XY plane. And then we will just reduce the number of points to 400. Let's do the first render network now. So let's grab a geo. The camera. The light. And the render tab. Let's change it to 1080 by 1080 and pixel format 32-bit float. Let's grab a null. Make the viewer active. For the camera, we will change the transit Z to 4. Let's go back to the torus. We will change the radius Y to 0.3. Actually, okay. We will create constant. That would be our resolution because we will need that later. Resolution would be 20. And then what we're gonna do is go back in the point generator, and then we will use the reference here and just copy and paste and times it so it can sums up to 400 points. The next thing we're gonna do is we gonna make the proximity torus. In order to do that, we need to use a copy pop. And then we will use some sphere to instantiate the points. So let's grab the sphere. Let's reduce the radius to 0.1. And then we will reduce the uniform scale to 0.07. Then we can connect it to the first input here. After the copy, we will select the proximity. Maximum distance in the proximity would be 0.2, max line per point, bump it up to 20. That's what's gonna make the lines actually look more organic. You could use 10 if you want, because sometimes it's hard on the GPU. But if your GPU can take it, you can bring it to 20 so it looks more like round. For that, you can connect it to the geo here. Next, after the point generator, we're gonna bring a noise to add some movement. You can change the C to whatever you want. Period is gonna be 2, and amplitude is gonna be 0.08. You can experiment with what you like, but I want it like not too big of a spread in the noise, so that's why I choose a small value. Then we gonna use the formula abs time dot second times 0.1 just to have side movement. Now if I bring back the original network, you can see that it goes from more thick line to more thin line, like kind of a wave pattern. In order to do that, we have to use lookup texture, and then we will reference the point scale and the color to the lookup texture. Let's first create a ramp. In the common, we will change the resolution to our resolution. We'll just drag it. Oops. drop the reference onto the X and the Y resolution. And then we will use New York pixel here. Into the ramp, I want kind of a circular pattern. I will change the type to circular. And then I will change period to 10. I change the period to 10 because I want it to be from dark to white. So from thin line to thicker line. When I change the phase here, that's kind of the movement we want. You can also add some more shade. To make the ramp move, we can use pattern trap. We can keep the type as a sign, and then the length I would change 600 because I wanted to match the timeline here. So you can see it here that it starts at 1 and end at 6000, so it's 10 seconds. And we will use the time slice, a matte, and then a null. Now what I want to do is I want to start dark and then go from white and then dark again. In the matte, we're going to change the range. We know that the sin wave goes from -1 to 1. And then we're going to change the range to -1 to minus 0.9. Let's try that. Then in the ramp, we're just going to drag it onto the face. Okay, now after the noise, we're going to bring up texture. I'm not sure if we have to put all 3 attributes here, but I always put all of them just in case. And then we're going to change the color. We're just going to drag the ramp here on the top. So you can see that the points are changing. But to activate it in the copy, you have to go into the template attribute here, enable the use template point attribute, and select color. Now we want to do the same thing, but with the point scale. Lines can become thin or thicker depending on the ramp. So let's bring another lookup texture. And we will choose here the point scale. Drag the ramp. And we also have to enable it in the copy. In the copy, let's go in the template and then point scale. We're basically done with the first part. Now we're gonna duplicate the geo and duplicate the render. So for the first render, just drag the geo onto the render and then select Parm geometry. So it's only gonna select that geo to render it, and then do the same thing on the second one. But on the second one, we want the points. We will, after the noise, just drag the new line and connect it to the geo2. If we want to see them, we can just use an add top. Connect it here with the null. And now you can see the points, but in the original visual, they were like bigger. So what I did is I changed the uniform scale to 1.1. So now they're scattered all around the torus. We will add a material next. So in the material, select the font and just drag it on both of the geo. Bring the diffuse to something like 0.5. We're gonna make the third render, the grid. In the pop, let's bring the grid. Change the uniform scale to something like 6. So we want it to be big. Copy and paste another geo and just drag it here. And we will also copy and paste render and farm the geo. We will use another add just to see what we're doing. So now what's happening if I split the screen and geometry viewer, we can see that the grid is passing through the torus. So you can just move it a little bit backward, something like 0.8, so we can later see the shadow also. And we want to make the grid also darker so we can better see the torus. So let's copy and paste the material, the font. Just drag it here. And the diffuse, just bring it down. Okay, next we're gonna do some post-processing to make it look a bit better, because it looks great now, but it missed some shadows and some other processing. Just gonna bring back my window. For the first render, actually I did nothing for the post-processing. I left it like that. For the points, I had some bigger Louis points and some also tiny points. What I did is I use an edge and I connected the edge to a transform and a blur. For the edge, I put the strength to 10. And then in the transform, I just made it a little bit bigger. So I put 1.05. And in the blur, I put the filter size to 14. Then I use another add to add the original points with the blurred points. Then just change the first add here. Okay, we will now create a shadow. So just to see the shadow a little bit more, I will just change the diffuse of the grid here, but we will put it darker later. So in the light, in the shadows, shadow type, you will use soft 2D. And then the max shadow softness, just push it to the max. And we can also change the shadow resolution to have the same resolution as our render. And then we have to move the light a little bit to have some shadow that we like. So usually I right click and then view, and then I move the lights until something I like. Maybe something like that. Let's try it. We can keep this open if we want to change it later. And then I don't really like the kind of hard shadow that we see. So what I did is after the render 3, I got a blur. And then I just blur the shadow to something I like. You can just push it way back if you prefer kind of a soft shadow like that. And then we can reduce the diffuse of the fog. We can slightly see it, but we can also add another light, make it brighter. And then you can also reduce the diffuse of the light a bit. Something else you could do is maybe add a bloom. We'll break down the pre-black level to 0 and then the min bloom radius to 0.2. And then you can change the bloom intensity. If you think it's too bright, another trick is that you could, for example, if I think the proximity is too bright, I could just bring a level here. And then in the post, just reduce the opacity a little bit. And now the little points stands more a little bit. And then you can also play with the shadow. But I feel like the centered shadow is pretty good. Yeah, that's pretty much it for this tutorial. Maybe something that you can try by yourself is making this audio reactive. For example, you could, instead of putting a pattern here, you could bring your audio and just move the phase with the beat or with the kick drum or anything. You could also animate the bloom to have like flickering. Yeah, you could also instead of after the proximity, you could use a quantize, which I really like. Makes this more square. So for example, round, then bring up to be something like that. Then there's kind of another feeling, but then you can see my frame rates are really dropping with that. So what you can do is just reduce the resolution here to avoid. Maybe it won't look that great, but yeah, it's something you can try. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope it was useful for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.